Okay, so we are starting today a new class, a new subject, that is. We are going to be studying the book of Shemuel, which is one of my favorite books. I love the Tanakh in general. The book of Shemuel is a great book, and I'm looking forward to teaching it. So I just think that in order to study the book of Shemuel, it would be good to give you a nice introduction to what the book is about, because in the book of Shemuel, we're going to be studying about King David. And when we study about David Melech Israel, we're also studying about Malchut Bet David. So I want to give you some information regarding what Malchut Bet David is, all right? And one of the reasons I started this subject now is because we recently, not so long ago, we finished the holiday of Shavuot, and we know that Shavuot is the day that David HaMelech passed away. It was two things. It was Shabbat and it was Shavuot, right? We learned from the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat Daf Lamed that David HaMelech died on Shabbat, and there was a question: what do you do on Shabbat if somebody dies? So the Gemara deals with that particular subject there. We learned from the Yerushalmi in Masechet Besah Perek Bet that David HaMelech died on Shavuot. Today, Shabbat and Shavuot would never fall out on the same day. It can't happen. But back then, the Kiddush HaChodesh was al-pi ha-re'iyah, velo al-pi ha-cheshbon, and therefore Shavuot was able to fall out on Shabbat. So that's when David HaMelech died, and we're coming right off that holiday. So a good time to start studying about Malchut Bet David. And let's make a tefillah, a twofold tefillah. Number one, that we should study the subject correctly, that we should understand it precisely. There's many fantastic stories that we're going to be reading. Malchut Bet David has many tribulations, it has many ups and many downs, and there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from these stories, but we want to study the stories correctly. There's a famous story of David and Goliath, which people love quoting today and misconstruing and misinterpreting. We want to study it correctly. There was a story of Shaul HaMelech and the way he persecuted King David, or the way he persecuted David before he was the king. That's a whole big part of the book. There's a story in the book of Shemuel of the special relationship that was forged between David HaMelech and God, and his incredible loyalty to God. On the other hand, we also have David HaMelech and Bathsheba. That's another story that we hope to get to. And finally, David HaMelech wants to build the Bet HaMikdash, and Hashem says, no. Why? What's that about? What is the reason? Hashem says, no. You're not going to build the Bet HaMikdash. The Bet HaMikdash is going to be built by your son, Shlomo. So we're going to be reading these stories, Be'ezrat Hashem. My strategy is I'm going to read the Pesukim as I always do. And you may remember the strategy is to just first study the Pesukim, get some sort of superficial understanding. And then after we get the superficial understanding, I like to go more deeply. I like to take a deep dive into the Pesukim and study the concepts. That's always been the strategy. I like doing that whenever I study the Tanakh. So we're going to do that here also. We're going to follow that strategy. So we said we have a twofold tefillah. One part of the tefillah is that we should have the zechut to study this part of the Tanakh correctly, precisely. We should understand what the points are and what the lessons are. And we're studying about Malchut Bet David, so it would also be appropriate to say that we should have the zechut of seeing the renewal of Malchut Bet David, right? We see what's happening in Israel today. Not too different than a lot of other parts of the world where there seems to be a cloud of darkness falling on humanity. Unfortunately, we see that Israel really needs Malchut Bet David. I mean, it's almost ludicrous what has developed in the political sphere in Israel. I'm talking about what's happening politically in Israel, for those of you who are following the news. So it's okay now to make a tefillah to Hashem that in Bizchut, the limud that we are doing about Malchut Bet David, right? We should have the zechut to see the renewal of Malchut Bet David. And we always say on Sukkot, שנזכה להישב בסוכת אורו של לוויתן. We should have the zechut to participate in that special banquet that will be thrown in honor of Melech HaMashiach, and we should be able to say the pasuk coined by David HaMelech, none other than David HaMelech, Kos Yeshua Tesa Ubshem Adonai Ekra. So that's the, let's call it the forward to the class. That's what I hope to accomplish. These are my goals and my objectives. And of course, our goals are national goals regarding the reinstitution of Malchut Bet David. I want to tell you a personal story. I would be remiss for not saying the story. So many years ago, decades ago, when I was young, I used to be a rabbi in Bet Torah. I used to give classes in Bet Torah. This is going back literally decades. The classes were, thank God, they were quite successful in terms of the fact that I taught Torah and many people wanted to study Torah with me. So, I don't remember if you were there, Natan, or not, but like
I was there.
They took us from room to room. We started with a small room, and then finally they had to give us a Bet Midrash. They couldn't give us a main sanctuary, obviously, because Alav Shalom, the great Rabbi Lieberman, what nishmato and what a zechut that we knew Rabbi Lieberman. He was in the main synagogue, so they gave me the second floor. I was in the second floor, and I remember people were crowding into the room, standing outside in the hallways, and I say this story because I during those years that I was in Bet Torah, this is back in the 90s, and before I made Aliyah, of course, I forged special relationships with many of these Talmidim, many of the students, and then I decided to go to Israel. And before I go to Israel, there was a young person who himself was originally from Israel, and he lived in Brooklyn, and he was one of the people who attended every single class. I don't remember his name, I remember his face, and I assume that now if I saw him, I might not even recognize him because it's been so many years. But anyway, he gives me a series, he said, I want to give you a gift, Rabbi. You taught us so much Torah that I want to give you a gift. And he gave me a series of tapes, recordings on the class of Shemuel. And he told me, listen to these classes, listen to these tapes. So I didn't care for tapes so much. I had a very I was very happy with the Torah that I received, and I still am very happy with the Torah that I received, but he gave me the tapes, and I was very thankful. I said, how nice of him. So anyway, so one day we were in Israel, and we're driving in the car, and the cars back then had cassette players. I don't know anybody old enough to remember what a cassette player is. It's like this rectangular plastic structure, which has like a ribbon inside, and they used to use it to record classes. So we had a cassette player in the class. I said, let me start listening to the classes. So the name of the rabbi was Rabbi Moshe Siman Tov. And what was he teaching? He was teaching about the book of Shemuel. He was actually teaching the book of Shemuel. And I remember, it was a long drive. We were going to Jerusalem and driving place. And I remember every time I would drive, I would put in the cassettes. And at first I was a little, skeptical whether there would be anything good in the class. It's just my personality. I'm very critical at the intellectual level. I mean to say when I'm critical, I mean to say intellectually, I'm very critical of, things, and I like to hear things and understand them. And I love the classes. I love them. I remember my wife and I used to listen to it, and the kids would be in the car listening to it. And many of the ideas that I'm expressing now, Allah Shalom, he passed away at a very young age. I don't know what happened. I know that one day I was in Israel, and I was teaching the book of Shemuel in Israel, and I mentioned his name, and somebody told me, oh yes, he passed away. I said, how did he pass away? He was very young. I don't remember the reason, but Chazit, he passed away. So I want to give him the zechut that a lot of the things that I'm saying in this class were inspired by those car rides in Eretz Yisrael, where I used to listen to his classes on the book of Shemuel. And I have to mention his name. I'm not going to mention his name every second because, I can't start saying what comes from him, what comes from him, but I do want to mention his name, and I did that. But we're also going to be using other mefarshim. We're going to be using Rabbi David Kimchi, the great mefarsh on the Torah. 1 second, let's admit somebody.
Sorry, what was his name? Sorry.
Who? The one who gave those classes?
Yeah.
Rabbi Moshe Siman Tov.
Okay, Mechila.
Right. More than that, I don't know. I think he was in Brooklyn. Baruch atah. So that's a Moshe Siman Tov. But we're going to be using many mefarshim. We're going to be using Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, the great grammarian, the great mefarsh in the Torah. I don't say grammarian to somehow mean that all he knew was grammar and not other. Although the Sephardi Hachamim, they were bekiim in the Gemara, they were bekiim in the Midrashim, they were men of great learning, but he had a tremendous knowledge of Hebrew grammar, which is the foundation of everything for us. We're going to be using Rabbi Yitzchak Abarbanel, the great Don Yitzchak Abarbanel. We're going to be using various midrashim and other commentaries and other things. Some of the ideas will be my ideas. So I'm not going to be able to mention every single person at every single point in time. These are just ideas that have been fermenting, so to speak, like good wine, in the sense of good wine that, kind of builds up in your mind, and ideas that just, ferment over many years and many decades of studying. So I just mentioned these hachamim in passing, of course, many of the ideas of my father as well. So that's where the class derives from. Now, I want to actually delve into the subject matter of Malchut Bet David, the kingdom of David, okay? Because it's a very special concept in rabbinic thinking. It's a very special concept for Am Yisrael. It has to do with the political axis of the Jewish people, right? So, we have a religious axis which has which contains ideas, right? It contains a particular epistemology, how we think as Jews, what we believe in. There's individual mitzvot that we must perform, right? There's obligations that we have as individuals, but then there's a political axis. At the end of the day, Am Yisrael is a nation. And as a nation, the same way we have individual mitzvot, and there's certain norms of behavior that as individuals we must pursue. There was also the political axis. So who our kings are, how we behave as people, are we successful? Are we intelligent, right? So, these are all very important concepts. So if we want to look at the political axis, if we want to understand Malchut Bet David, we actually have to go back to the creation of the world. Hashem creates the world. And when Hashem creates the world, he puts into motion, let's just call it, for purposes of this discussion, because I don't want to go deeply into the nature of the world, but I'm going to call it a perfect clock. Okay, let's call the world, the universe, a perfect clock. It has its internal mechanism. It has the scientific laws that govern the universe, whether it's the laws of physics or the laws of chemistry, whether it's particle physics, whether it's quantum mechanics, whether it's the laws of biology, and all the various different types of systems that allow the world to work as a perfect system. So let's just call that let's call that the perfect clock. Whether it is exactly a perfect clock or not, subject for another discussion. In this world, Hashem decides to put this wild card. Okay. I understand that if I put a seed in the soil and I properly nourish the seed with water, it's going to turn into a tree. That's not a wild card, right? I understand that bees are going to be producing honey, and they're going to produce honey by pollinating flowers, which will in turn will allow the flowers to flourish. And that's not a wild card. That's just the way God created the world, right? So there's a lot of things in the world that work perfectly. There's a lot of things in the world, and I just realized I have a background while I'm sitting in a synagogue. My apologies. First of all, let me stop that video filter. Okay, that's number one. Okay, that's better. Number two. Okay, number two. Okay, good. So so those are not wild cards. We understand the way this is going to work. We understand the way the world works. And there's, again, a certain mechanistic aspect to what happens in the world. But Hashem decides to put a wild card in the world. He decides to put something in the world that is unpredictable, that we don't exactly, there is no rule that governs how this thing is going to work. This thing can do whatever the heck it wants to do. This thing can do good things. It can do destructive things. I'm talking about Adam. I'm talking about the human race. The human race is that wild card. It's a wild card in the sense that, we can one day build an atom and, destroy half the world, or we can choose not to build an atom and atom bomb to destroy half the world. Who knows what's going to happen? Was it Albert Einstein who was asked about World War III, because World War III, after World War II, they dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they asked Albert Einstein, how is World War III going to look? What's going to happen in World War III? Because of course Albert Einstein was instrumental, or at least the science of Albert Einstein was instrumental in allowing for the creation of the atom bomb and then later on the hydrogen bomb. So he said, I don't know what's going to happen in World War III, but I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen. I don't know how they're going to fight World War III. That was the question. How are they going to fight World War III? Nuclear bombs and whatever. And he said, I'm not sure how they're going to fight World War III, but I'm pretty sure how they're going to fight World War IV. And I said, how are they going to fight World War IV? He said, with sticks and stones. That's Albert Einstein. So I don't know what man is, what crazy destruction man is capable of doing. I'm not sure. So I don't know what man is going to do. I don't know how this whole thing unfolds. And that's exactly the point. The point is that there is no science governing the unpredictable nature of man. Who would have thought that after what happened in Israel over the, last month, we saw there was an Arab uprising, and it was a very dangerous and very unpleasant situation because there were literal pogroms in Israel. They were burning synagogues, they were attacking Jews, they were trying to kill them. I don't remember what exactly happened, whether anybody was actually killed or not, and Be'ezrat Hashem, nobody was killed. But who would have thought that after that they would say, this is a great time to do something we've never done before. Let's give them more political power, bring them into the coalition. So again, man is a very unpredictable creature. Right? That's a very unpredictable thing. So man decides to create this unpredictable creature, wild card called, God decides to create man, this unpredictable creature. And the Malachim, the Midrash says that the Malachim are having a discussion with God and they're saying, why would you do this? Right? Because you remember the Pasuk, it says, Na'aseh Adam b'salmenu kidmutenu. Who is God talking to? Let's create man. Who is he talking to? He's talking to the Malachim. So the answer of the Malachim, when Hashem says, Na'aseh Adam b'salmenu kidmutenu, Hashem is listening to the Malachim, and they continue and they say, Ma enosh ki tizkerenu uben adam ki tifkedenu. Why would you create this man? This man is a little nothing creature. What is the benefit? He's just going to bring ruin to the world. In a sense, the Malachim made a very good point. They made a very valid point. But Hashem says, and the Chachamim teach us, that when Hashem created the world, he says, I'm actually creating the world for the ultimate objective of creating the world is twofold. The first is for the Torah. The second is for the Jewish people. As far as the Torah, the Pasuk says, Adonai Kanani Reshit Darko. Listen to the word Reshit. Adonai Kanani Reshit Darko Kedem Mif'alav Me'az. This is a pasuk in the book of Mishleh, and it says that when Hashem created the world, he had in mind the Reshit. The Reshit is the wisdom of the Torah. So the wisdom of the Torah, Bereshit, right? Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. You hear the word Reshit. So why did God create Shamayim va'aretz? Bereshit, for the Torah. So that Torah is called Reshit. So that's one of the primary reasons that God created the world. The second reason that God creates the world is also the word Reshit. It says Bereshit again. So there's a pasuk that says, and I think we read this in the Haftarah, the Haftarah of Pinchas in most years, depending on how it comes out. But there's a pasuk that says, Chodesh Yisrael Adonai Reshit Tevuato Kol Ochelav Yeshamu. Right. So here the Jewish people are called Reshit. Right? Because the best is called Reshit, like Reshit Bikurei Admatecha. You bring the best fruit to God. So what is the best thing that the world has? The best thing is the Torah on the one side, Am Yisrael on the other side. And this is why God creates the world. So Hashem tells the Malachim, yes, you make a valid point. And yet, I am not interested in creating a predictable world. On the contrary, to create a predictable world would be easy. I want to create a world which has this wild card, which has this man that can make things, that can do things, that can choose to do good and choose to do bad. And I want to dwell my presence, says God. I want to dwell my presence among men, right? I want to dwell my presence about these very men that are subject to their whims, that are made from the soil of the earth, that have a Yetzer Hara. but they choose to do good. But they choose to do good. I want to dwell my presence, not among the, yes, among the malachim, of course, but that's not the great wonder of creation. The malachim have no yetzer hara. So it's not a wonder that the malachim would be doing good. I would even say that the hayot, the animals in the jungle, they don't have a yetzer hara, they don't have a yetzer hara tov. They just have, they have biological needs, and they do whatever they need to do to survive as God created them. I wouldn't even call that a yetzer hara, right? So you have the hayot, hayot hasadeh, right? You have the hayot hasadeh. One second. Right. You have the hayot hasadeh, and you have the hayot hakodesh, right? Neither have yetzer hara, right? They don't have yetzer hara. So the great thing here is that God chooses to dwell the Shekhinah, or wants to have this point in human history where he dwells the Shekhinah among these very men who are created from the earth and who have yetzer hara and who choose to defeat the yetzer hara in the service of God, who choose to submit themselves to God. So they are born with evil. Yetzer lev ha'adam ra min ne'urav lepetach hatat roves. They are born with evil, and yet they choose, as an act of submission to God, as a worship of God, they choose to do good. And Hashem says, this is who I want to dwell the Shekhinah among, as the Pasuk says in Perashat Terumah, when Hashem creates the Mishkan, the Pasuk says, Ve'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. I want to dwell my Shekhinah among these people. So, when we talk about Yetzer Hara, I know many of you would say, oh, that's very midrashic, I don't have to take it so seriously. I would submit to you that you have to take it very seriously. The great C.G. Young discusses the Yetzer Hara and wrote many, many books on the Yetzer Hara. The only thing is C.G. Young doesn't call it Yetzer Hara or Yeser. It's a Sadi, actually, so I'm sorry. It's Yeser Hara. C.G. Young calls it something else. He calls it the shadow. And he explains about the shadow, how the shadow is this part of man that's right there under the surface. It is an evil part of man. It is something that we don't want to come to terms with. And part of the psychology of C.G. Young, which I think many things he wrote, not everything he wrote, I don't agree with everything he wrote at all. There's many things that I disagree with, but part of what he wrote, certainly about the shadow, is fascinating and compelling and is aligned with the Torah. Okay, so let's start with Adam Arishon. Adam Arishon is in Gan Eden. He has literally the eternal world in its full magnificence as he is created. He is created fully formed, fully adult, with all of his needs taken care of. When he feels lonely, Hashem creates Chava, and there they are. They have the eternal world before them. But here's the point, and maybe a lot of what we're going to be reading is connected with the following theme. Nothing is for free. Hashem wants man to earn a living. What I mean to say when Hashem wants man to earn a living, I mean to say Hashem wants to dwell among men, to dwell the Shekhinah within humanity, if humanity deserves to have God dwell the Shekhinah within them. So it's never for free. God doesn't just create us as holy beings, that he has a malachim. He doesn't need to create man for that, he already created the malachim. But rather, God creates Adam, he creates Hava. Somewhere there is the Nachash, probably outside Gan Eden. They don't do a very good job guarding Gan Eden. They should have guarded it, because the Pasuk says that when Hashem creates Adam and he puts Adam in Gan Eden, he says, Le'obdaha ul shomra. You have to work the garden and you have to guard the garden. What does it mean to work the garden? That's easy. Do what you need to do to take care of the garden so the fruits are coming out and they're delicious and everything is well nourished and taken care of. What does it mean? Le'shomraha? It means to guard. To guard against what? Well, there you have it. There's a Nachash. What is the Nachash doing in Gan Eden? He shouldn't have entered Gan Eden. He did enter Gan Eden. So they didn't do what they're supposed to do. And this Nachash, let's call it the Yetzer Hara, he causes havoc. And Adam And it's not, I don't like the word causes havoc, because that implies cause and effect. But I said it anyway, because I wanted you to think about that. The Nachash doesn't cause havoc, right? Man chooses a road that leads to havoc, right? Man chooses to turn away from God and to accept what the Nachash is telling him, right? So it's important. So again, nothing is for free, and ultimately Adam loses it all. He's kicked out of Gan Eden. He's kicked out of this incredible state of existence. He now has to be on the regular soil of the earth, and the soil of the earth, unlike the soil of Gan Eden, is not a very friendly place. You work hard, you sweat, you plow, and you put the seeds in, and you do what you're supposed to do. And I don't know, will it rain this year? Will it not rain? You will sweat, right? You will sweat a lot. But the pasuk says, "Vekos bedardar tasmiach lach." It says, and even if you sweat, you might end up working really hard. And what will you get at the end of the day? Thorns, thorny bushes. That's the nature of the reality that Adam is in, meaning it's not like Gan Eden. In Gan Eden, you work, you get what you need, everything is wonderful. In the real world that Adam is in now, post Gan Eden, things are totally messed up. The world is a tough and dark place. So the original idea of perhaps, having Adam as receiving the wisdom of the Torah, obviously, is taken off the shelf. That's done with. So that cannot be the case. So at this point, there is now going to be a selection. And as you know, there are 10 generations from Adam to Noah. And at the point that Noah comes, all of humanity, except for Noah, is wanting. All of humanity has corrupted itself. Everybody corrupted their ways. What was the nature of that corruption? A subject for Parashat Noach. But they were so corrupt that God said, enough of this, right? God begins to consider what humanity is doing, and he realizes that humanity no longer deserves to exist. He decides to destroy all of humanity. We said there was a selection. Under this selection, it is now going to be Noah. Noah is the only one who merits survival, okay? So Noah comes out of the Teva. When Noah comes out of the Teva, Hashem repeats to him the 6 laws that he already taught to Adam, and he adds an extra law. These are the Sheva Mitzvot Ben Noah. The Sheva Mitzvot Ben Noah are given to Noah. The last one is the Mitzvah Even Minachai. And Noah now receives this Mitzvot, and this is the new hope for humanity. The new hope for humanity are the Sheva Mitzvot Ben Noah. One of the Sheva Mitzvot is the Isur of Avodah Zarah. It is forbidden to do Avodah Zarah. What happens after that? There are 10 generations from Noah to Avraham Avinu. And again, you see every 10 generations, there is this selection. At the point of Avraham Avinu, once again, the entire world reverted to darkness. It is now the darkness of Avodah Zarah. Everybody believes in some sort of weird system where the world is eternal, where it has not been created, where there's different gods and different forces, and they have idols that they worship, and each idol is supposed to represent a different god. And at the center of this idolatrous culture is a king, a dictator. His name is Nimrod. So in this dark world, 10 generations after Noah is born Abraham Avinu. And Abraham Avinu is called Abraham HaIbri. Ibri means Jewish. It literally means, it doesn't really mean Jewish, because Jewish is from the word Judah, right? But Ibri actually means Mil Ever, right? One of the great grandchildren of Noah was Ever. Abraham Avinu descended from Ever. That's why he's called Abraham HaIbri, because Ever was a Sadiq. Shem, the son of Noah, was a Sadiq. Ever, several generations after Shem, was a Sadiq. So you had Noah, you had Shem, you had Ever, and then eventually you have Abraham Avinu. Abraham Avinu was called Abraham HaIbri, not just because he descended from Ever, but because he followed in the ways of Ayaved and in the ways of Shem, right? You see that point? Now, the word Ivri also means Ayaved, it also means other side. And the Hachamim comment that all of humanity was on one side of the river, and Avraham Avinu stood alone on the other side of the river. All of humanity acknowledged that the earth is flat, or that there's Avodah Zarah, or whatever other belief is in vogue. They always have these beliefs that you must accept, and if you don't accept it, there's something wrong with it. All of humanity was on one side, and then Avraham Avinu was alone, and he said, no, I reject Avodah Zarah. I submit to the idea that there was a single creator to the world, and Avraham Avinu began to seek out this creator, and he established a very special relationship with God. So this was a state in that point. Now, once Avraham Avinu came, the pasuk says, "V'zarach hashemesh u'bahashemesh." In a sense, Avraham Avinu was the great light of the world, because he, unlike Noah, who was a light unto himself, and that's fine, but Avraham Avinu was literally the sun, in the sense, son of the world, Shemesh, sun, right? I'm translating the word Hebrew for sun, right? Shemesh. So in the sense that he shone upon the world, and he brought many, many people to the belief in a single creator to the world, right? So that's a special thing about Avraham Avinu. He planted a special belief system in the world, which says, no, it is not the king who is the ultimate leader. It is a single God who is the ultimate leader, right? And then this teaching, this seed, this wisdom of Avraham Avinu, it continues from Abraham, it continues to Yitzhak, from Yitzhak it continues to Yaakov Avinu. And what's interesting is not if we go forward, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. What's interesting, and I've been talking for a very long time. Does anybody have any questions? I'll just give a little break.
What's interesting is that I didn't realize it's going on. I thought that was
Yeah, Evan, exactly, because he was a descendant of Evan. Exactly. That's right. Exactly. So, okay, yes, sir. You'll see. We're going to connect all of it. All of it is going to be connected to Shemuel. We're talking about Malchut David. I want to give the proper context, the proper background. So a little more patience, and you'll see the connection. So we were talking about Avraham Avinu starting a new thing. But what's interesting is the tremendous contrast between Abraham and his father. His father was Terach. So Avraham was the son of Terach, and because he was the son of Terach, right? Terach was one of the chief proponents of idolatry in Ur Kasdim. So Terach was it's not like there was some sort of Terach influenced Abraham and said, listen, you should think about maybe a new idea. But on the contrary, Terach himself was the right-hand man of Nimrod. He was the main supplier. The Hachamim say that Terach was the main supplier of idols to the people of Ur Kasdim. So if somebody needed to buy an idol, they would go to Terach, the father of Abraham Avinu, and he was the supplier. So he was very, very heavily involved in Avodah Zarah. So we can understand now why Abraham Avinu, he doesn't have a son immediately, because it takes a very long time for Abraham Avinu to reach the point where he can have a son like Yitzhak. Before he has a son like Yitzhak, he has to marry Hagar. And from Hagar, he has Ishmael, and a lot of the bad stuff, it's funneled away from Abraham, and it goes into Ishmael. Let's call it the dregs, right? So they go to Ishmael. It's only when Avraham Avinu was 100 years old that finally Yitzhak is born. Avraham Avinu undergoes a transformation in his name from Abram to Abraham. Sarah has a similar transformation from Sarai to Sarah. And then they have their son Yitzhak, representing the fact that there is now a disconnect between the world of Avodah Zarah that Avraham Avinu was born into and the new world that Avraham Avinu is now producing, which the first generation of that new world, rather the second generation, is Yitzhak. But when Yitzhak gets married, he has to go and marry Rivka. And Rivka herself gives birth to two children. One of the children is Esav. Esav is, the pasuk says, Admoni. Admoni means he was completely red. And the symbol here is that this is a person who somehow will, in history, develop into develop a nation that will murder many people. And of course, that nation is Rome. Rome was a descendant of Esav, Malchut Romi Harishah, which was eventually going to kill many, many Jews, as they did during the second Commonwealth. On the other hand, we have now Esav, and then we have Yaakov Avinu. What does the pasuk say about Yaakov Avinu? Ishtam. What does Ishtam mean? Perfect. What is the perfection? The perfection is that all of the pesolet, all of the dregs, all of the residue left. Esav took it all. Now Yaakov Avinu was perfect, and therefore he was able to start the new nation. Yaakov's children will all be part of this new nation. So now they're ready to get things going. Again, I want to maybe make a slight digression to the book of Iyov. So if you look at the book of Iyov, in the book of Iyov, we have this person called Iyov. Iyov is a Sadiq, Ishtam ve'yashar, Yare Elohim ve'sal merah. The pasuk says he was perfect in all of his actions. And the Satan comes to God and tells God, Ahinam Yare Iyov Elohim. Why do you think Job worships you? Why do you think he's so good? Well, the answer is because he is in a great situation. Everything was given to him for free. Take some things away. See how he behaves. So that's a story more or less of Iyov. And then we know what happens. The Satan comes and he's given free reign over Iyov, and he takes many things away. And Iyov now is in a terrible situation. And here's the question. How is Iyov going to react to this? Will he continue with his belief in God? Will he continue in his obedience to God? Or will rather he revert to some other mode of behavior where he no longer shows proper behavior, where he no longer shows proper obedience to God? That's the challenge of the Satan in the book of Iyov. And I think it's a symbolic thing, because the point of this story is to say that there is no immaculate holiness. Okay, so I said Yaakov was an Ishtam. He was perfect in the sense that all the dregs were given to Esav. Before that, the dregs were given to Ishmael, right? So now Yaakov is the father of the new nation. But it doesn't mean that it's automatic holiness. That's what I want to say. But rather, there's always going to be a challenge. There is always going to be, together with this holy nation, there is always going to be this thing that tries to take them away. The symbol of the story of Iyov is to tell us that where there is holiness, there is always going to be the question, well, why do they deserve this holiness? Why do they deserve this exalted position? Why is everything good? Well, it's good because they're acting good. Well, why are they acting good? Is there anything seducing them to the other side? Well, if the answer is no, then why did they deserve all of this wonderful things that they got as a chosen people, right? And all that. And the answer is, there is no immaculate holiness in a people, but rather Hashem is always challenging people. Hashem is always going to try to give people the opportunity to do what's wrong, so that if they don't do what's wrong and do what's good, they get the proper reward. So there is never a situation where, it's going to be perfect. There's always going to be these challenges. There's always going to be these things that pull us in one direction, and it is up to us to pull ourselves in the other direction. And a lot of what's going to happen in Malchut Bet David is going to be part of that. That theme is going to repeat itself over and over again. We spoke about Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was born to Terah, who was like the chief proponent of Avodah Zarah. So he wasn't born in a great situation, was he? He had to pull himself away from that situation. Let's look at the wife of Yitzhak. Her name was, as we said, Rivka. Rivka was a daughter of Betuel. Her brother was Lavan HaArami. Lavan HaArami was one of the main people instrumental in allowing Rivka eventually to go and marry Yitzhak. But this Lavan HaArami is identified by the Hachamim, the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin. It says that this is Be'or, the father of Bil'am, meaning he was one of the main magicians, believed in magic and paganism and idolatry. He's the one who told Rivka, Achoti at hayi le'alfe revava, right? So again, it's not like Rivka came from a great, family of tzaddikim. On the contrary, Rivka came from a situation which was very ambivalent and dark, but she chose to do good. She chose to follow the ways of Hashem. And we know what the Hachamim say, that Rivka, she was able to replace Sarah Imenu. And that's not an easy thing to replace. So you see, again, there's no static holiness in the people, but rather, what do we have? We have struggles and we have choices. And we must make the right choices. And I like the word struggles because even when we do a good choice, it's always going to be a struggle. Hashem never makes it easy. Because anything that's easy, well, why would I reward you for that? Why would I make you the exalted people and give you the land of Israel and make everything so wonderful? Well, you don't really deserve it. So there's always going to be that struggle. Kisarita im Elohim, right, Batuchal, right? So exactly. So now let's get back to the people of Israel. So we spoke about Yaakov Avinu. He was called Yisrael, right? Kisarita im Elohim. So he was called Yisrael. And this Yisrael, he is now going to be the father of the new nation. Where is the new nation born? The pasuk says, "Ve'ele shemot bnei Yisrael habaim Misraima." Where was Misraim? Misraim was one of the worst places on earth. There was two terrible places. One was Eretz Canaan, that was a Canaanite nation. The other was Eretz Misraim. The Egyptians were so bad that the Chachamim say they reached the 49 Sha'arei Tum'ah, the worst Tum'ah in the world, meaning it was all Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayot. In the Egyptian monarchy, it was like many of the European monarchies, which is like kind of like it's a little disgusting to talk about, but it was all this intermarriage within the family and not getting too much, not explaining them to great detail, but it was a very terrible place. So where is the Jewish nation born? They're not born in a place of tremendous enlightenment. They're not born in a Protestant society where there's some sort of biblical values, whatever that means. They are born in the worst place. We start as a nation in Egypt. Again, the theme is the same. The idea is, I'm going to put the Jewish people there in that bad place. Let it be a struggle. Let's see what they do in Egypt. I want them to thrive in Egypt because ultimately it's a question of choice. And then finally, we do leave Egypt. We do escape from there. We come out as a free nation. We leave the Avodah Zarah of Misraim and we get to Har Sinai. And in Har Sinai, we become a Mamlechet Kohanim. What does Mamlechet mean in Hebrew? A kingdom. So this Mamlechet Kohanim is a kingdom. We form ourselves and we constitute ourselves as a nation, right? With political institutions, with a Supreme Court. I realize I have to plug my, one moment. Right. That's better. Okay, so we have a Supreme Court, we have political leaders. The political leaders are called Zekanim. We must make decisions. Some of our decisions are good, some of them are absolutely catastrophic, such as in this week's Parashat Shelach Lecha, but we become a Mamlechet Kohanim. And a lot of the story of Malchut Bet David has to do with that theme. We are a kingdom, we are a political entity, but Hashem is going to say, you want to be my people, earn it. It's not for free. Yes, I want you to struggle because I want you to show me that you really deserve the ultimate. And what is the ultimate? One day we will build the Bet Mikdash and Hashem will dwell his presence within the Jewish people. but I'm not going to do it for free. I'm going to do it because you're going to work hard, and I'm going to make sure that you work hard. So that's where Malchut Bet David comes in, and that's why Malchut Bet David is not a picnic. It's full of these ebbs and flows and ups and downs and victories and then defeats. That's the nature of the story, right? That's what it's about.
That's what ties in what you said. So the history of man, Jewish law is no different. And starting from, that's what the rabbi was trying to say, that from the beginning of time, from Adam, right, you want to know, is when we had our struggles, and that it's always ups and downs that we have to deal with. And Abraham, the same thing, Noah, and it's a theme that God purposely wanted mankind to have that, so that you can hopefully come out ahead on each one of these challenges that you have in life. And it's not secluded to just smoke, because when you see it, it's probably very high ups and downs that you're seeing what you're going through in the book. Put it in context from the beginning of time, it's no different. I mean, no, there's no immaculate, pristine, perfect scenario that God, that our, the way we look at the world or society, and it's full of challenges and struggles and needing to make those choices.
Yes, well said, well said. Excellent. So what I'm going to do is, today I'm going to read a few, we have 5 minutes. Oh, yeah, you know what, let me read a few Pesukim. Let me read a few Pesukim. I'm going to be in Perek Tetvav. I think next week we can I think we had some books there, but okay, maybe next week we'll work on that. But let me just read the end, before I start with Malchut David, which of course is when Shemuel goes to anoint David HaMelech as the king. I want to start with the end of the kingdom of Shaul. So Shaul HaMelech was anointed as the first king of the Jewish people. He was the first one, right? And Shaul HaMelech is a special figure in Jewish history. He has such a beautiful midot. He has such beautiful qualities as a human being, such humility, and yet he failed. So I want to talk a little about what happened to Shaul. So Shaul HaMelech was sent on a war. One of the things that the Mashiach is going to do in the future when the Mashiach comes, and one of the first things that Shaul had to do back then was to, the Pasuk says, Machot timcheh et zecher Amalek. There was an obligation to get rid of the Amalekites. The reason there is such a strong obligation, which may rub us the wrong way, or some people the wrong way, rub our sensitivities the wrong way, is because if you don't get rid of Amalek, and as history has proven, Amalek will ultimately seek to destroy the Jewish people. So Hashem says, Machot timcheh et zecher Amalek, go do it. Shaul is sent to get rid of the Amalekim, and during the course of the war, he encounters the cattle of Amalek. He encounters Agag, who apparently was a very charismatic figure. And instead of destroying everything and killing everyone as he was supposed to do, he lets Agag live. And he keeps the cattle, and he says, this cattle, I will bring it as korbanot to God. Okay, so that's what he does. He wants to bring the cattle as korbanot to God. They're beautiful cattle, and he wants to let Agag live. And of course, this was a catastrophe. It was an absolutely terrible decision. It was inexcusable in the sense that he was given very specific instructions. Why is he going against the instructions? We can speculate, but it doesn't matter. The bottom line is that at this point, God speaks to Shemuel, and he tells Shemuel, go tell Shaul that his kingdom is over. And I'm going to read the pasuk. The pasuk says, "Vayomer Shemuel el Shaul heref de'agida lecha et asher diber Adonai elai halayla." This was nighttime. It was at night, and Shemuel says, "Quiet, enough. I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want to hear why you let them live. It doesn't interest me. It just doesn't matter. I just want to tell you what God told me this very night." Vayomer lo daber, and Shemuel, King Shaul says, please, what is the message? Vayomer Shemuel, halo im katon ata be'ainecha rosh shibtei Yisrael ata. You may be a humble person, and humility is a wonderful thing. But if you're the king of the Jewish people, you're not supposed to be humble. Okay, if you're a political leader of the Jewish people, no, this is not a time for humility. Okay, right? If we're going to be humble, as a nation, we're going to be humble. Like, okay, well, you shot a few rockets at us, it's okay. Like, go ahead, let me give you the other cheek. That's not what I want. No, if you're my nation, go and act like a nation, one nation under God. And if you have to defend yourself, go defend yourself and do it properly. And don't give me any of this phony humility. So you may think that you're a small person, no problem, good for you. That's great when you're a private citizen, but you're not a private citizen. You're the leader of the Jewish people. Hashem anointed you to be the king over the Jewish people. And Hashem sends you on a mission and he tells you what to do. And because of your humility and, oh, we shouldn't do this, it's not the right thing, this poor sheep, whatever. Okay, very nice. Because of that, there's going to be grave consequences. There's going to be grave consequences in Jewish history because ultimately the Amalekite nation survives. And because the Amalekite nation survives, they take swipes at trying to eradicate the Jewish people several times in history, right? That's all because of this mistake. And Hashem says, from this point onwards, you are no longer going to be the king of the Jewish people. You are going to be replaced by someone better than you. The pasuk says, and I'm just skipping, I'm just getting, because next week I want to start with Machuk David. The pasuk says, Vayomer elav Shemuel. Shemuel tells Shaul, Tara Adonai mamlechut Yisrael me'alecha hayom. That's it. God is tearing away. He's going to tear away the kingdom of Israel from you. Meaning it's not going to be an easy process. He's not going to give up easily. Tear it away means he's going to be holding on. Shaul's going to be holding on. And God is just going to tear it away. He's going to find somebody better to be the king of this nation. And with this, we're going to end. So I want to just summarize what I said. So what I said is, in a 1 minute summary, is that God could have created a very simple world. Everything could have been beautiful, pristine, perfect, works like a clock. Everything is tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. But the problem with that world, at least from God's perspective, maybe not from ours, but from God's perspective, it would be too simple, it would be too boring. He didn't want to create a boring world. He wanted to create an interesting world. So he puts this wild card and he says, this man has the ability for incredible evil. And I want to dwell my Shekhinah among this man because he has the ability for incredible evil and he decides to do incredible good. That's what I want in the world. And it starts with Adam. Adam fails, goes to Noah. Noah doesn't quite do anything. Abraham Avinu starts a new movement in humanity. It leads to the Jewish people. You notice that God is always challenging everybody. Abraham is born to Terah. Rivka is born to Betuel, chief idolater also. Always a challenge. The Jewish people start in the place of Avodah Zarah, in Mitzrayim. So it's always this challenge. We're going to read about David HaMelech. David HaMelech himself has many, many challenges. And we will be reading about these in the future classes on the book of Shemuel. Have a good night.